Be quiet. Just listen. There. Did you hear it? You didn't. Let's try it again. Shh. Listen carefully. There. Did you get that? That was the sound of a shutter, a mechanical shutter being used. And today's video is going to be a bit different to what I normally do. Today's video isn't going to be doing a lens review or a camera review or anything like that. I'm not going to be going up some historical part of Hadrian's Wall. I'm going to be taking you back to something which is important to me. Now this is aimed at two different sections of my audience. The younger ones, the ones who've only ever known digital photography, and the older ones who've been used to the idea, who started their very first shot was on a normal film camera, an analog camera. And what I'm hoping to do is try and stir some memories in some of those older ones who start with the analog cameras, and try and bring some inspiration to those newer ones who've never understood what it's like to start on a film camera. Now when I first started my photography in the mid-60s as a child, I used my father's Kodak twin lens reflex camera, and I remember vividly the little button on the bottom that you used to look down through it, and there was a button and you press it in. It had a lovely sort of whooshing noise almost as the shutter released on it. There was no aperture to set, there was no speed to control, anything like that. You literally pointed the camera where you wanted it, framed up your shot, and then took the shot itself by pressing the button. But that sound has remained in my mind ever since. And to me it's a glorious sound. It's something which every time it happens, whether it's on an analog camera or a digital camera or even a mobile phone which simulates the sound of it, it's something which brings a little bit of joy. It releases a little bit of the old endorphins inside your brain to make you feel good. It's a bit of a drug. It's fabulous. So what's the point of this video today? Well, very simply, I'm going to go back in my mind to when I lost my photography virginity, when I took my first photographs, when I actually became somebody who took photographs for pleasure. And as somebody who does take photographs for pleasure now, it's become rekindled in me. I didn't realise I was doing this when I was taking photographs professionally. I was too busy concentrating on the job. But for me, to lift the camera up to the eye now, to focus on something, and to press a shutter release and hear that sound is music to my ears. So what is it that's special? What is it I'm trying to do? Well, as I say, if you're one of the newer breed who's only started on digital cameras, don't worry. This is just as important to you. But I'm going to try and impart a little bit of what has motivated me throughout the years to be a photographer. Now you've got to remember, when I took my very first photograph, it wasn't as easy as it is today. We didn't have that instant gratification of a camera and taking the shot and seeing that shot in front of us. Oh no. And this is going to really ring true with an awful lot of you out there. First of all, you had to go and buy the film. The film came either as a roll or in a fancy cartridge, and you had to put it in the camera. 24 shots, 36 shots, whatever it was, 12 shots on some of the roll films. And it came in different sizes. You had to carefully put it in the camera because you knew fair well if the light got into it, it would be ruined. So you had to do that with a certain amount of delicacy. You had to load it into the camera and make sure you did it in a fairly darkened place so you didn't go no light spillage. Then you wound on. You wound the film on, or you turned the little knob to wind it on to the very first shot, looking through the little red glass in the back to see the number 1 come up, or to see it on the meter on the top, the number 1, ready to take your first shot. But you also knew that you were very limited how many shots you could take. It was expensive, and it wasn't so easy to take photographs as it is these days. We didn't have auto exposure, or auto aperture, or auto focus, or auto anything. We had a box with some film in and a lens stuck on the front of it. So we brought the camera up to our eye, we composed the shot, and then we heard that wonderful, the sound of the shutter going. And now, of course, we just look on the back or look through the viewfinder. Not then. We had to wait. First of all, we had to wait until we'd taken all the other photographs we could do on that film. If we had a 36 exposure film and a 35mm camera, we had to take all 36 shots before we could even think about seeing if the results had been good or bad. Imagine that. Imagine having to wait until you've taken 36 shots. But also imagine the fact that that's all you're going to take. 36 shots, unless you put another film in, was all you're going to take out of it. You didn't use motor winds. If you did use motor winds, you weren't going to get very far on them because you would be through the film in no time. So this idea of multiple exposures with lots and lots of shots per second didn't really come into it. But eventually we would reach the end of our film. But again, it wasn't over. We had to carefully take the film backwards, back into its container or back onto the original roll. So you release the clutch, a little lever on the camera just to release the wind mechanism, and then wind it back. Wind it carefully back in, not too fast, not too slow, just making sure you didn't snag it until you got that lovely sound as the film came back off the sprocket. And then again, take the camera to a darkened area. Carefully release the back and make sure that you had got the film all rolled up properly. Put it back into this little container. And then, you weren't even finished at that point. You had to still wait. The film, you'd either take it down to the local chemist's or local drugstore, or you'd put it into an envelope and you'd send it off to somewhere through the mail, and you'd wait. A few days would come back until you got a little package, or you'd go back to the chemist to pick the package up, and you would get a folder. That folder would contain the negatives and the prints. And you look through those prints to see which ones had come out, which ones had came out correctly, which ones you were happy with, which ones you weren't. And because we couldn't test and because we couldn't try things easily, we used to get a lot of failures. Or at least I did. I think most of you probably did too. You get all those failures, or the little stickers which used to get on saying that the shot wasn't able to be produced properly because your exposure hadn't been right, or because it was blurred or out of focus, whatever it was. And the disappointment on those ones, I remember vivid disappointment on some of the shots that I'd taken because I was so wound up and looking forward to the results. And in those days, sometimes quite disappointed when they didn't come out the way you wanted them to. But then I got into the idea of doing my own processing. And that was a different field again, because I do all the things I've said previously about taking the photographs, putting the film in, taking the photographs, taking the film out. But then I would go to a dark room. And if you've done any darkroom work, these days I was talking about black and white photographs. I wasn't taking colour because it was just too expensive. But I go into a darkroom, and you go into this room, you prepare all the chemicals properly, you get them all up to temperature, the correct temperature, try and keep them at that correct temperature, and then you shut the door and switch the lights off. Wait. Wait 5 minutes for your eyes to become accustomed to the lack of light, to see if there was any chinks of light coming anywhere through. And if there was none, then you would gingerly take the film. If it was a roll film, it was easier. If it was in a cartridge, you had to break the cartridge open, all in the dark. You couldn't do anything with it. You had to just guess everything. It was all done by touch. And of course, you couldn't touch it too much because you put fingerprints on the film. But then you would get the carrier, the cartridge carrier, which you'd load the film into and swivel it backwards and forwards until it would self-load. And the film was in the reel. Put it into the container and put the light-proof top on. You could then put the lights back on again. Then came the good bit. You had a film inside this container, you start pulling the developer in. Temperature of the developer was critical, and so was the amount of time it was in there. You had to know what film was in and what the results were going to do, and know what the temperature was, because that would alter it. And also how many times you'd use that developer, if you used it more than once. All these critical things. You put the developer in, start the clock, make sure it was safe. Just the right time, you would pull the developer out, and then you would flush it, and then you go into the fixer stage. So you'd wash the developer out, then put the fixer in. The fixer would make sure that the negative was actually fixed. It didn't disappear, it didn't carry on developing, and whatever happened to it, it would stay in the state it was. Then came the washing. You had to wash it out with water and make sure that was at the right temperature, and make sure that the film was all ready. There was an excitement about it, there was a thrill about it. And eventually, when you'd done all those stages, you would take the top off, take the cartridge out, and then slide it up and gingerly take this wet film out and look at it. See if you could see anything on the negatives. Hang the negatives up to dry with a little bulldog clip on the bottom just to make sure that it would keep it straight, and then wait for it to dry properly, squeegee the water down through it. And then you could see the negative images. But you weren't ready then. You then had to produce a print. And if you had to produce prints, then you go back into the dark room again, into the darkness, get the enlarger ready, and again the baths for the enlarger, for the fluids on that, until eventually you could take that negative image and project it onto photographic paper and produce your prints. At only that point did you see if you're successful or not. So what's been the point of this? Am I just kicking up memories? Is it important? Well, I think to some of the older ones it probably did kick up a few memories. But my question is this: why did we do that? What was the thrill of it? And what do we learn from that which we don't have today? Well, I think patience was a great deal that we learned from it. We were also very, very economic in what we did. We knew that we had a limited number of prints. We knew that everything we did was very expensive. And that's not here on today's cameras, that's not here on today's photography, when you can pull your mobile phone out of your pocket and take an almost instant photograph within seconds, and you see it in full colour, high definition. Not only that, you can process it immediately to get it anywhere in the world within seconds by uploading it to social media. But I think we've lost some of the essence of what gave me the fun as a photographer. I think that idea of hearing that shutter, that little sound of the shutter, was inspirational to me. It was the thing that made me want to carry on going out to take photographs. It was the thing that made me want to go and enjoy taking it and actually fail sometimes, because those failures would be the very thing which would teach me how to do it right next time. And to me that was an essential part of my photography, and it's a part which some 55 years later I'm still putting into practice. And it's actually became more prominent because where I'd lost some of that when I was a professional photographer, where I'd got the idea of taking photographs for fun, now that I've started just doing it for relaxation, for enjoyment, when you switch that camera on, when you put it up to your eye, when you hear that sound of the shutter, you know that there's a photograph just been taken. The beauty is I can now see it instantly on the back of the camera. Huge difference. So what inspired you? Was it the sound of the shutter? Was it the feel of the camera? Was it that waiting and anticipation of seeing what was going to come out a week or two later which really drove you to carry on? Now if you're one of our younger photographers, try doing that sometime. Try not looking at the pack. Try not looking at the results straight away. If you can do it, switch off the EVF to a degree so as soon as you're taking the shot, take it away from your eye. And don't look at it for a while. Work out what you're doing. Think about that shot. Instead of taking 20 or 30 shots to make sure you get the right one, try and see if you can do it right first time. Imagine you only have 36 shots to do. It's a great little exercise actually. Take a camera out and every time you take a shot, that's one less. You got 35, 34. And if you can do that and only take say 36 shots in the day and make each one a keeper, each one useful, then you're going to probably increase your ability to take really good photographs each time, every time in the future. It's a great exercise and a great lesson to learn in photography. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way putting down digital photography. I'm not in any way putting down camera phones, because I think the technology we have is unbelievably good these days. The things that we have built into the cameras, the automation, the fact that the camera can make so many decisions, the artificial intelligence in the camera is unbelievable compared to what we had. And the images that we can produce from our cameras these days are in a different league to what we had in my time. Doesn't necessarily make them better, but the technology is there to make photographs which we could never have dreamt of. But take a little time, go back to some of the fantastic photographers of the 30s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and see what they were doing in little more than a box with a lens on the front and a single action shutter. See the results that they were doing. Go back to the old days every so often, if you're a modern photographer, and learn from those techniques, because those techniques being applied to modern cameras will make you a superstar photographer. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. My name is Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Give me a thumbs up, because that really makes a difference. And if you fancy buying me a cup of coffee to keep the channel going, there's a PayPal link below. But until the next time, don't forget, that sound of the shutter, enjoy it. Enjoy taking your photographs, enjoy your photography, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.